Welcome to Common Sense. Common Sense is a series of shows featuring interviews with interesting people in our area that'll help us to learn in a clear, concise, and direct way who these folks are, what they do, and what makes sense to them and what doesn't. I'm Rudy Breglia, and today I'll be interviewing a judge's judge, Avon Lakes Municipal Court Judge Darrel Bilancini, who's also a candidate for a position as a common pleas judge in Lorain County in 2022. Thank you for your service, Judge. Why don't you start us off, give us some of your background, tell us where you were born, where you've lived, how you've come to Avon Lake.
Sure. Well, I come from a family of 10 children.
Wow.
My dad was a fireman in Lorain, and my mom was a mom and a homemaker.
Okay. Plenty of work.
Yeah. I was born on West 21st Street in Lorain, and at the time, our family had grown to, I'm the fourth oldest of the 10.
Okay.
And there were 8 children, I believe, at the time that we then moved from 21st Street to 8th Street.
Okay.
Into a 4-bedroom house, and there were 13 people living in the house because my mom's mom, my grandmother, was also living with us.
Okay.
So
cozy.
All the boys were in one room, all the girls were in the other. Soon after we moved, there were 2 additions to the family with my sisters, and again 6 girls in the one room, 4 boys in the other. Lived there on 8th Street till I was married. I went to St. Mary's grade school and high school, which was right down the street from my house.
Mm-hmm.
And Lorain Catholic opened up when I was a sophomore in high school. So St. Mary's High School closed down. Lorain Catholic opened up. I went to Lorain Catholic for my junior and senior year. Graduated from high school, went on to John Carroll University in University Heights on the east side of Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And went to law school at Cleveland Marshall and graduated from there and went on to pass the bar and go on to a career of being a lawyer and then a judge.
What made you decide to become an attorney?
As I mentioned, I went to John Carroll, and during the summers at that time in Lorain, the steel mill was open. The Ford plant was open. There were lots of jobs available for summer employees, kids coming back from college. And I know that the summer after I'm pretty sure it was the summer after my first year of college, the steel mill was hiring, the Ford plant was hiring. I went to the Ford plant and made it almost through their physical.
Okay.
And then they saw a scar on my left wrist, and it was a scar that I had from a surgery when I broke my wrist when I was between 10th and 11th grade.
Okay.
And so they x-rayed it there and said,
oh, wow.
We don't need you, because they were concerned about the liability and the injuring it further. So within a short period of time, I made application at U.S. Steel in Lorain and was hired, and they gave me a job in the Coke plant. And, it was an interesting summer.
What is Coke?
Coke is a product that is created when you heat coal. Okay. Essentially, so they have batteries that they have. It's a battery because it's a big box building that's probably 20 foot tall and I'm not sure 30 foot wide and 50 feet long. And my job was to stand or work on top of that battery, which is an oven, and I was a lidsman on the battery, where they had holes in the top of the structure, and into which they would pour coal. I would put the lid on each of the holes, and it would burn for a period of time, and then
pretty hot stuff.
The coke was created, and they'd push it out, and I'd have to then take the lid off and let them go through the process again. But I also did other functions. I wore long underwear, even though it was 90 degrees out, because the long underwear would allow me to sweat, and my sweat would go onto the long underwear, and that would cool my body. So that was the experience I had that summer. It caused me to really count the days before I went back to school. And next summer, I didn't work at the Coke plant, but I worked in the steel mill as a laborer in the docks. And the next summer, I worked again at the docks. That gave me a lot of incentive to do something other than go to the U.S. Steel. Because my older brother and my younger brother, just a year older and a year younger, worked at the steel mill. I preferred to do something else.
Yeah.
So
it's dangerous and dirty work.
So my question to myself was, well, what next? And there were some fellas my junior year at college who were taking the LSAT test.
Okay.
And I thought, well, that's an option I'd consider. So I decided to take the test, and fortunately I did well enough on it to qualify to be admitted to several law schools. And then Cleveland Marshall was a good fit for me. It was close. It was relatively inexpensive. I got some grant money, and so I went to law school. Didn't know any lawyers. Again, my dad was a fireman.
I see.
I had never talked to a lawyer. Didn't know any of my friends whose fathers were lawyers. So I kind of went into it as an unknown, but I knew enough about it that I knew it was a profession that you can do good things for people. Mm-hmm. So that's really the reason I went to law school.
You made a really good choice.
I think so too. Yeah.
Okay. Well, tell us about the steps you've taken in your career.
Okay. Came out of law school, and at the time did know a lawyer, and that lawyer had an office in the Broadway building in Lorain, which is now the Ariel building. It's a hotel now. But I was on the third floor of the Broadway building, sharing space with this attorney, and fortunately I was able to get a position with the Lorain County Court of Common Pleas Juvenile Court. At that time was called a referee. They're now called magistrates. So I served as a magistrate for the next year and a half, being a judge. So the magistrate in juvenile court handled traffic cases and delinquency cases. So I would be a hearing officer, making decisions on guilt and innocence and sentencing juveniles, people who were under 18, to fines, and sometimes I'd put them in the detention home, and whatever the penalty was appropriate. Mm-hmm. So I had that year and a half experience, got to know some of the other attorneys in the community, got to know a fellow by the name of Jerry Savoy, who turned out to be my law partner for the next 30 years.
Wow.
So Jerry invited me to join his firm, and it was time that I moved on from the juvenile court and went with Jerry. And it was probably the best decision I made in my life, because Jerry was a great mentor. His business was primarily what's called insurance defense work. So I was a litigator. I was representing people who were insured by some of the companies that we represented, and I would represent those people in lawsuits that were filed against them that were covered by the insurance. So usually it's an automobile claim, sometimes it's a homeowner's claim, but then for the next 30 years I was able to have a practice where I went to the common pleas courts in Lorain County, Cuyahoga, Medina, Huron, Erie County, primarily those adjoining counties to Lorain County, and was a trial lawyer. Great experience. A time came in 2005 when Jerry was thinking about retiring. I was thinking about what next, and I discovered that Judge Mackin, who was the municipal judge in Avon Lake at the time, was going to retire. And I considered running for election, something I'd never considered before. I'm not a politician, not someone who had an interest in politics or actually even becoming a judge. I hadn't really thought about it, but the opportunity was there, and I thought, this is a good fit. The timing's right. It's something I had done in juvenile court as a magistrate.
So you fit right into it.
Yeah, and the other thing I did during the term of my career was to serve as a mediator and an arbitrator. So what a mediator is, the Bar Association would sponsor a mediation week. Typically it was in November, pre-Christmas, and people would want to settle because of Christmas expenses, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So the court would assign the case to be mediated. I was among a team of mediators who would be available to assist parties, so that the plaintiff's attorney and defense attorney and their clients would come at a specified date and time, and they would meet with me and other mediators who would also volunteer to serve, and we try to settle cases. And we had some good success. Actually, the percentage of resolutions was pretty high. So I had that experience while I was practicing, and then I also served as an arbitrator. An arbitrator is a panel of three attorneys who would hear a case and actually make a decision as to value. So these are all civil cases.
Right.
So we're dealing with money and liability. So the question would be, is the defendant liable for damages? And then if so, what's the extent of the damages? And so we would put our heads together, and if 2 out of the 3 would come to an agreement, hopefully all 3 of us come to an agreement as to liability and damages, then we would make an award. And it was not binding, meaning the parties didn't have to accept that. They could appeal to the judge, basically saying, we don't want to resolve the case with the number that the arbitrators came up with. We want to go to trial either before the judge or before a jury. I'd say 50% of the time the case was resolved with arbitration, but I had that opportunity to hear evidence, make a decision, and serve essentially as a judge. So with those experiences, I felt comfortable when the time came to run for the judge in the Avon Lake Court that I could do this.
You had enough diverse experience that
Right.
you could do that.
Yeah.